What is up, Terps fans? Welcome into another Fear the Podcast. I'm Matt Modderno. It's my great pleasure here to be joined by Steve Gorgei, the host of the Route 1 Rundown. It's actually my favorite Terps podcast, so if you are already not subscribed to it, go do that right now. Do yourself a favor. Steve, as like the most measured but like fan relatable post-game analyses of anybody. So you get real like breakdowns of the game, but it's actually very Maryland themed. I feel like the post games from Big Ten Network, Steve, are always very like, I don't know. It never feels like it has enough Maryland flavor to it. So like having somebody that gets the team but is still objective about it, I think is a superpower and one I do not have. So I appreciate you being able to be calm and rational after some of these games, and welcome on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for the kind words, Matt, and thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan of this show and everything that you're doing, so pumped to be here. And man, I sure didn't feel measured after the Trey Holloman shot and the episode I did after that Michigan
That's fair.
State game. But I appreciate you saying I try to be measured. I try to take an objective view at things, but at the end of the day, I mean, I am a Terp through and through. I've been watching this program, watching this team since I was 5 years old. I think Joe Smith was my first word, something along those lines. So I try my best to be measured, and I appreciate you saying it, but it doesn't always feel like it.
When we get 4 buzzer beater losses in one season, it's expected that not all of them will be able to keep our cool all the way through. But more times than not, I think it's definitely appreciated for me as a fan, because sometimes I need somebody to chill me out. Like we'll have an ugly win and I'm like still been out of shape about it. So I appreciate you doing that. And you mentioned being a fan of this program for a while here. So we're going to go back in the time machine here a little bit. So for folks listening to this, we are going to do a draft. Everybody loves a good summer draft episode. So what we're going to go through is Steve and I are going to take turns drafting players that played at Maryland this century. So if they were not on a team 2000 and later, they were disqualified from this. This is mostly for me because I just didn't want to talk about guys I was not alive when they played. So that's sort of the disclaimer here. We're going to keep it to Gary players, Turgeon players, and Willard players. So we're going to take 3 guys each that played for each of those coaches, ending up with a 9-man rotation, which I think is relatively representative of like, where a college basketball team would be in the postseason is unless you're at Maryland and only have 5 players that you're willing to play in a postseason. But for the most part, I think nobody goes beyond like a 9-man rotation. So that's what we're going to roll with. I guess, Steve, we should talk about this beforehand. I didn't think about it. Do we go snake draft or would just alternate?
Yeah, I think we can. I guess we'll go snake. We'll do a little snake draft here.
Okay, I like it. All right, sir. Why don't you kick us off here and give the number 1 pick? And for folks, we're gonna build a team that makes sense to us, whatever that may be. A semi-modern basketball team, I think, is a reasonable way to look at it. Probably can't be like 5 centers just because they were the 5 best players or whatever. So the attempt should be to round out a reasonable team. Again, drafting players that played since the year 2000. So that does include the national championship guys. And then we'll go through and list a couple of our guys that we left off the list begrudgingly here, just because they at least deserve a little bit of a shout out. But Steve, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first one's a pretty easy one for me. It may have been different if we had expanded this back a little bit further. I think there were a couple other options out there, but how can I not go with the most accomplished player in Maryland basketball history? Of course, that's Juan Dixon, first all time in career points, 3 times all ACC, 3 times all ACC defensive team, the ACC Player of the Year, a consensus National All-American, the NCAA Tournament Most Outstanding Player, and the guy who brought Maryland their one and only national championship. I mean, look, I know it was a little bit of a different era, but nobody was better on that catch and shoot than Juan Dixon. I can't imagine if synergy was around the kind of stats we'd be getting on every ACC broadcast back then, talking about how good Juan Dixon is off that catch and shoot. So for me, regardless of era, it's a no-brainer to go with the most accomplished Maryland basketball player ever, Juan Dixon.
You always need shooting unless you're a Buzz Williams team. So I think Juan makes sense for almost any era here. So I think that's a no-brainer first pick, like you said. So great call. I'm going to stay guards here. And you could maybe argue some folks were slightly more accomplished in the winning department, although this guy got pretty far. I got to go with the general here, going Gravis Vasquez. We're going positional size on my team. So started off with a big point guard. Just kind of makes sense. And just from, a pure nostalgia perspective, got to have the guy that made the senior year run for us on senior night against Duke. So can't beat that. And I guess That's 2 in a row here, right? So let me see. All right. Trying to go value here because there's so many less guys for certain coaches. So I'm gonna go Derek Queen with my second pick here. Just get my my Willard big man here out of the way early.
Yeah, great pick. That's exactly what I had as my 1, 2, 3 as well. I had
Nice.
Dixon, Vasquez, and Derek Queen. Now, my fourth guy, and this is who I'm going to take here. I think it might get a little controversial, to be honest with you, Matt.
Okay, like spicy.
I think this is a guy who is one of the most undervalued players of these last 25 years, and I'm not entirely sure why. And he's Jalen Smith, Sticks. I'm going Sticks with this fourth pick here. He's a guy who, I mean, he was a big-time high school recruit. He comes to Maryland. He lives up to all expectations.
It's true.
I mean, he's a third-team All-American in his final season in 2020. Maybe it was because the tournament was canceled. Maybe because we never got to see that team make a run and what they could have done. Maybe it was because they were fading a little bit towards the end of that stretch. But I'm going Jalen Smith here. I mean, I just said it. He came into Maryland and he did everything you would expect him to do. He was a third-team All-American in his final season in 2020. I was checking out some stats today on CBB Reference, and he actually has the third highest win share per 40 of any Maryland player since they started keeping that stat in 95, 96. A great defender. I think in this modern era, I always think about versatility, switchability. Sticks really switchable, and he could step out and he could hit some outside shots too. He was great in the pick and pop. I think he's a guy that I honestly wouldn't mind seeing him in the rafters at some point.
I think you nailed it with why he doesn't kind of just like pop to the front of everybody's mind immediately with like great Terps of, X amount of time is solely because we didn't get to see that postseason run to really cement it. And then also just, I think a lot of us were just kind of over the Turgeon run by the end of that too. And I think he unfortunately gets lumped in there in a bit. And maybe just because the pro career has been like relatively uninspiring, it sort of takes a little luster off just how good a college player he was. But I think that's a great pick. Again, a versatile guy. You can play him at the 4 or the 5, depending on what you want to roll out there with him. So I think that's a very good call.
All right. And then it's back to me again, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Why not reunite the best backcourt that Maryland's ever had? So I'll go Steve Blake. I'll take the point guard here. I'll take my second Gary guy of the night. I mean, when I was thinking about Steve Blake, I wasn't sure where I was going to have him because he's the kind of point guard you don't see a ton of anymore. He's a pass first guy. He's a playmaker, but there were still times, and I think you saw it especially his senior season, the year after the national championship, where he could take on a little bit more of a scoring role when he was asked to, when he needed to. He was a tenacious defender. He didn't back down from anybody. I think you need a little attitude on the team. So I'm going to reunite the greatest Maryland backcourt we've ever seen. Give me Steve Blake.
I like it, but you have one requirement here the rest of the way. You now have to draft John Gilchrist at some point in time just to see how that might play out here in reruns. But yeah, that's a great call. You can't go wrong with like the preeminent Maryland point guard. Like if you say point guard specifically, like that's the guy I think of just from like a purely traditional set everybody up kind of perspective. So
real quick before we move on from that, I mean, could you imagine if TikTok was around when that John Gilchrist, Steve Blake video came out? Oh my goodness. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah, it'd be the college version of the Draymond Green Jordan Poole fight, essentially, except
no doubt.
Somehow on a college team, it almost feels a little worse, although I think it probably happens more at that level than people might expect. All right, let's see. So you got 2 Gary guys. You got 1 Turgeon guy. So far, I've got 1 Gary guy and 1 Willard guy. Again, for folks, we're going to take 3 of each from each of those coaches. All right. I think I am going to... I'm going to go value here, I think, and just because there are a few less guys available. Ooh, actually, no, you know what? I'm going to go Melo Trimble. I think he and Gravis could play well together in a backcourt. There's enough size there. He provides some shooting. Get to the free throw line a little bit. We're going to be about free throws and 3-pointers on my team. So I'm going to go Melo Trimble and give myself the first Turgeon guy off the board for me here. All right, let's see. So it's back to me again here too. So, I think this one is maybe a little of the controversial line in terms of order here. I think, Steve, tell me what you think about this. I think I'm going to go Kevin Herter next. Add a little size, a little playmaking, some additional shooting here. Like I said, we're going to go a lot of threes on this team. And I think he could fit nicely with these other guys and give Derek Queen some space. What do you think about that choice?
Well, it's not controversial to me because that's exactly who I was going to take if you didn't.
Nice.
Take him.
All right. So that makes me feel better.
Controversial to me at all. I mean, that 2018 season, again, I think that's a season that gets a little bit lost to history because they weren't very good that year.
Right.
But there were some games where it just seemed like Kevin Herter could do anything he wanted on a basketball court. And I think he's just the perfect fit for this modern era of positionless basketball, of having shooters all over the place. Kevin Herter's a guy that I think he gets, man, this as we're talking about this whole Turgeon era, there's so many good players
that really are
through in the Turgeon era, right? And I mean, you don't have to look any further than what's going on in the NBA playoffs right now, and a guy who's on one of those rosters, and Aaron Wiggins, and we may talk about him more at some point, but there are so many good players like that who came through that it just felt like the whole was always worse than the sum of the parts with those teams, and it's disappointing to look back on in some ways, but it's also kind of makes me think maybe I took some of these guys for granted watching them because of the disappointment of those losses.
Yeah, it's so funny putting this list together. Once we decided to cap it for guys this century, I was like, all right, that cuts some of the Gary guys out, but still a lot of decent. There's good depth there, but Turgeon, like year for year, the talent is maybe the highest of this group. And then obviously Willard had the shortest run and no bench whatsoever. So it's the slimmest pickings anyway. But I think you could very easily make the argument, probably most fans would, that they underachieved with most of those teams there. All right, you are up here with your fourth pick.
Yeah, I think things get a little bit tough here for me, especially with Kevin Herter off the board. You take a look at my team. I have Steve Blake, I have Juan Dixon, and then I have Jalen Smith in the front court. So 2 Gary guys, 1 Turgeon guy. I'm looking for a little bit more shooting here. I'm thinking about defensively what this team looks like. Sticks, of course, a really good shot blocker, a really good defender. I would like to get somebody like a stretch 4. I'm not sure if the time is right for that right now. And then if it's the guy I'm thinking of, that would completely close out my Gary category. So this is really hard right now.
Yep.
Where can I go? You know what? I'm gonna I need some shooting. This is a guy that I'm taking way earlier. There's no way he's the 8th best player of the decade or anything along those lines, but I am going to go because we're going to have to draft 3 Willard guys.
Exactly.
I'm going to go and get Rodney Rice now. He's a guy that I wish was still playing on this Maryland team in the 2025-2026 season. Unfortunately, he's not, but I was just so impressed over the course of his 1 year here, the way that he developed throughout the season. I thought he developed into a 3-level scorer. He's a great shooter. I thought he was decent on the defensive end. I think there's a lot of room for growth with him still too. So I'm going to take Rodney Rice as my first Willard guy.
That's such a good call. I actually considered that with my last one too, just because when you look at the other Willard guards, they're both a little smaller and in Jameer and Jacoby. So I was like, all right, Rice is probably the biggest of the 3. He can do a little bit of on-ball, off-ball, and you've already got a good on-ball guy. So I think that's a great call.
You know what's interesting with him too, Matt? I think it got kind of lost in everything else that was going on with this program after the Derek Queen shot and the lead up to that Florida game. But in that now infamous interview Kevin Willard did on the Kevin Sheehan show, he had said, if Queen didn't say in the huddle, I want the ball, or let me put it more correctly, I want the MF ball. He was probably going to give the ball to Rodney Rice in that situation. And I was kind of starting to think throughout the stretch run of that season that Rodney Rice was really the guy that I felt most comfortable with the ball in his hands in those big spots. So I'm still disappointed he's not going to be a Terp in 2026.
Yeah, that's like just from pure from my heart perspective. Like I was really attached to Rodney. He was actually my favorite player from that team for whatever reason. It just sort of resonated with me, the local guy coming back home that way and having like this nice comeback. So selfishly, I would have liked to see him be a multi-year Terp, but That's okay. I can't blame a guy for wanting to be out in the sunny California weather. So more power to him.
No doubt about it. I'll be rooting for him, except for when the Terps
Exactly.
play the Trojans. All right. One more pick for me here. And I think this one is definitely going to get the people going a little bit because he's a
Uh-oh.
guy you probably haven't thought about in a long time. He really only had one good season at Maryland. His sophomore season was cut short by injury. He was not the same player he was his freshman year. I'm going to go with a guy who played under Mark Turgeon as a stretch four. I'm going to go with Justin Jackson. He
Oh,
was
there
a
you go.
guy who was a really versatile defender. He had a 7'3" wingspan. He could step out and hit the three. He was a really good three-point shooter his freshman season, but it kind of, he just regressed in a major way that sophomore year, in part because of the injury that he suffered. And then he was out of here and never heard from again. But good rebounder, versatile player, versatile scorer, and I think he's a guy I would like to play at the stretch four on this team. And now I've got a team where you have Steve Blake, Juan Dixon, Rodney Rice, Justin Jackson, and Jalen Smith. That's a lot of shooting on the court.
For sure. That's a great pick. I had him on this list here too for largely the same reasons. I was thinking about like a good offseason pod would just be Terps who have made bad draft decisions in retrospect. And it's both he and Diamond Stone, I think, are the front runners for guys who went a little bit too early. And then you could probably say like Melo stayed a little too long, unfortunately. But there's probably some other names I'm not thinking of on the list there. But yeah, he's definitely up there for sure. And yeah, he's like a physical, tough guy. I really did think he'd kind of make it work in the NBA and at least be having the same kind of like, NBA career that Aaron Wiggins is having of like a nice rotational bench wing forward type.
Do you think it was, if you were me, would you have taken Aaron Wiggins over Justin Jackson there? I mean, it's hard not to given everything that we know about their careers now, but I was really trying to just think about their times at Maryland and when they were at their best at Maryland. Who would I take?
Yeah, I think for the group you had, just having a little bit of extra size and bulk, I think if Jackson is like a beefier guy than college Aaron Wiggins, he's filled out a little bit more now. So I think that makes sense. And you could still get Wiggins later. That might be a really good value pick for a guy that obviously didn't mind coming off the bench, considering he fought to do it more times than not. So, that's you could get a comeback around here later on, I think too. All right, let's see. I've got one Gary guy, two Turgeon guys, one Willard guy. So I've got Graves Vasquez, Derek Queen, Melo Trimble, Kevin Herter. Man, all right. This is tough because you nailed it a couple minutes ago with this is not the eighth best player or ninth best player, whatever the case may be, but you got to go certain value at certain positions here. So that's what I'm trying to weigh of who really fits the best together. I tell you what, this was maybe a little early for this guy, but I just got to get him on the roster because he's from Maryland and no one can beat him. I've got to take Nick Cantor-Medley here. I really liked him as a player, maybe more than he gets credit for because that team relatively underachieved as that group coming off the national championship here. But this is a guy that had a long career in Europe. And I think being like a stretch four almost for this team gives us a little versatility. Can play some on the wing here and would give some spacing next to Derek Queen as well. So yeah, I'm going to go Nick Cantor-Medley with my 5th overall pick. Is that a reach, Steve? Did I go too early for Mr. Cantor-Medley?
I think he's a guy that's a little bit of a victim of circumstances because it's impossible to not be disappointed. His junior and senior seasons were the 05 and 06 seasons, and Maryland missed the tournament in back-to-back years, just a few years removed from winning a national title, just a year removed from going on that run in the ACC tournament when it seemed like, okay, the transition is over. It was a rocky 3 months, but they figured it out, and now we're going to go on this run again because this is just what Maryland does now. And
Sure.
ultimately, it turned out not to be the case, and those were two really frustrating years. And he was the best player on those frustrating teams. So I don't think he'll ever be remembered the way that maybe he should be. But when you just think about putting together team, when you think about skill set, he's a guy that, he could take smaller guys in the post. He had a perimeter game, and he could pull big guys out there. He was a really good player. He was 2-time All-ACC. I don't think it's a stretch. I think he's just a guy that is never going to probably get his due credit because he was the best player on a bad team. And, I think for most fans, myself included, your impact on winning is what
Yeah,
matters most.
sure. We're going for quotable guys who can sell T-shirts on my team. So between him and Derek Queen, might be two of the better quotes from our lifetime here as Terps. So I couldn't resist that one. I'm going to keep the rest of the Crab Five front court together here and take my second Kevin Willard guy and go Julian Reese here just to keep he and DQ together, because I don't know. I didn't think that pairing would work out quite as well as it did, but they seem to fit well and enjoy playing together. And I've got enough other shooting I can kind of make up for it, I think, here. So, yeah, we're taking Julian Reese, the knockdown free throw shooter, with my sixth pick.
Nice. Hard to argue with that. I mean, that was a great pairing. It worked better than I think anybody could have expected. So,
including Kevin Willard, to be honest with you.
I think so. But I went with the national championship backcourt. You went with the Crab Five front court. Hard to argue with either one of those. All right. Well, I got 4 spots left here. I got room for one more Gary guy, one more Turgeon guy, and 2 more Willard guys. And this is where things really do start to get tough. But I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go for my backup point guard right now. And I'm going to go with Jameer Young. I wanted to go with a Willard guard. I'm going to go with Jameer Young over Jacoby Gillespie. And I think Jameer Young, when I think about those two guys, and I'm a big fan of both of their games, but I thought Jameer Young was just asked to carry a much heavier burden than Jacoby Gillespie ever was, and I think he really thrived. Look, Gillespie's the better shooter, no doubt about it, but I think Jameer Young was quicker. I think Jameer Young was probably the better playmaker. I think he had better court vision, and on this team that I'm building, I think I value that a little bit more than more scoring and shooting prowess. So give me Jameer Young here with my first pick.
The better defender of the two. Not that Jacoby was bad, but I think Jameer, despite having to carry the load offensively at times, was still really good defensively, I think, for most of his time here. And you mentioned creator for other people. Put him on a team with actual spacing and like not people packing the paint against him. And I think he could have been a guy that averaged, I don't know, close to double digits assists, maybe even if he'd played with this year's team, to be honest.
All right, for my next pick here, look, this is a team that I'm building that is going to be very much in Gary Williams' image. We're going to get out and run. We're gonna have big time shot blockers inside, and that's why I'm going with Bruno Fernando. I'm going to finish out my Turgeon category here because he was a guy that I think could have very much fit in that Gary Williams style, in that Gary Williams era where he's playing a style, getting up and down the court, being that rim protector inside. Bruno Fernando, I always think about the transformation he made from his freshman to sophomore year was one of the most impressive transformations that I've ever seen. And, that was a point where I was pretty out on the Mark Turgeon experience, but that was one of the things that kept me thinking like, okay, well, we've seen his ability to develop some guys, Bruno Fernando being example number 1. And then, he brings in that class with Jalen Smith. Things look like they're going the right way in 2020 for at least part of the season. That was something that kept me just hanging on by a thread for a long time, the development of Bruno Fernando from his freshman to sophomore year. But Bruno Fernando, great defender, great rebounder, not providing a ton necessarily on the offensive side, certainly on the perimeter, but look, you get him in that dunker spot and he'll throw it down with the best of them.
Also, him being a role guy and a pick and roll with Jameer Young is something I wish I could have seen in real life, to be honest with you, because I just think that level of athletic finisher next to Jameer would have been super cool to see. Not a knock on Julian, but he just wasn't the same sort of vertical, explosive athlete that Fernando was. And also just like an awesome energy guy to have too. Like the vibes on your team are going to be terrific just because somebody like Bruno fitting in there too. So very good call, I think.
Could Gravis and Bruno have played together? Is it just too much energy on one team, on one bench?
Yeah, one of them might have exploded at some point, I think, because I feel like they both would have needed to like top each other, but I would have liked to see it. So
me too.
Yeah, well, somebody's gonna have to take these teams after, by the way, and put them on one of the college basketball games and simulate the outcome for us and let us know how it would have worked out here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I've got 2 of each from Gary, Turgeon, and Willard. with 3 picks here left to go. So I've got Graves Vasquez, Melo Trimble as my 2 guards. I've got Cantor Medley and Kevin Herter on the wings, and then Derek Queen and Julian Reese in the front court. I could probably maybe take one more of each here. Let's see. Not really much from a shooting perspective being added by doing this, but I feel like I just kind of need to do it. Going to compete in the Big Ten. You need one more large, beefy body. And something about the idea of Lonnie Baxter and Derek Queen playing together in a front court, to me, it'd probably be atrocious from a spacing perspective, but I still just kind of want to see it. That was the prototype of what somebody like, Derek Queen turned out to be, is like a bigger than you would think guy that moves for that size and has some footwork. So yeah, I'm going to go Lonnie Baxter here with my last of the Gary picks.
And talk about a guy who maybe doesn't get enough due, because
Yep.
Juan Dixon sucks up so much oxygen from that team. But Lonnie Baxter was 2-time regional MVP.
Incredible.
I mean, he was the MVP of Maryland getting to its first ever Final Four in 01 and then getting back there in 02. And maybe that best game of the whole tournament run was the UConn game. He was an unbelievable player. And, he doesn't necessarily fit at 6'8", 260 or whatever he was listed at in this modern game. But he was a guy that you just felt like if he gets positioned in the post and you get him the ball, he's either A, going to score, B, get fouled, and if he does get fouled, he's going to make his free throws. I mean, he was just an unbelievably consistent player. And you even look going back to, you kind of forget that in that 2000 season, before they made the Final Four runs, when they had a freshman Steve Blake at point guard, and those guys, Dixon and Baxter, were sophomores. He was all ACC that year too, as was Juan Dixon. Like, it was a progression over 4 years, and he really took it up those last 2 years, but he was a great player throughout his entire career, just super consistent.
I think you nailed it. We wanted a guy that is going to work hard and push everybody else to get better here on the team. And I think Lonnie's the guy that you look at. You had that with Juan as the self-made guy. I think Lonnie can do that for somebody like Derek Queen. That's somebody for him to pay attention to, of just getting in the lab and continuing to refine the skill set. So there you go. All right. So I've got 2 left here. I've got 1 Turgeon guy and 1 Willard guy. I think I'm going to just try to, the Willard ones they're getting a little light here. I don't know that I necessarily need another point guard here, but I'm gonna do it anyway and just take Jacoby Gillespie here as basically my backup to Melo Trimble and Graves Vasquez.
All right, then I will finish this thing off. I have 1 Willard guy left. I have 1 Gary guy left. I think the only realistic Willard guy that you can pick is Selton Miguel. That finishes off the Crab 5 for us. Look, I'll add a little more shooting to this team. Never a bad thing. I just don't know who else you possibly could have picked. I mean, I don't think you're going to do Dante Scott.
Let me ask you a question, Steve. The one I had was Hakeem Hart. Do we count him as a Willard guy? He played only one of his seasons for Willard, played the rest of the time with Turgeon. So I wasn't sure where we would bucket somebody like that.
I think we can count him. I think if you played for the guy, we give you credit, especially when the whole era was only 3 years long. I think we can give the benefit of the doubt there, but I still think I'd take Selton Miguel over Hakeem Hart. I'd still just rather have that shooting on the team. Sure. And then I will finish it off the last pick here, and it's a Gary guy. It's got to be a Gary guy, and I was honestly hoping Lonnie Baxter would fall to me, because I just want that Lonnie Baxter toughness on my team. But there's some really good options here. Let me just walk you through a few of them before I actually make the pick. Okay, Chris Wilcox, a guy who is just uber athletic, was a key part of that national championship team. That's an option. Drew Nicholas, a guy who was a reserve on that national championship team, but really came into his own in the 2003 season, was second in the ACC in scoring, averaging nearly 18 points per game his senior season, shot 41% from 3 on nearly 6 3-point attempts per game. The guy could absolutely light it up, even though he was listed at I think he was listed at 150, 160 pounds. He was not a thick individual, but he could really shoot the basketball.
Scout for the Brooklyn Nets right now too. If anybody gets bored, go find their Brooklyn Nets show, Scout, on YouTube. He features in there a couple times.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. And then the last guy I'm going to consider here is Terrence Morris. So
Hmm.
he spent some time playing in the 90s, but he did play a couple seasons in
Yep,
2000s. I think he counts for this.
definitely.
And he is a guy that he really probably had his best season in 99 playing alongside Steve Francis. And he's a guy, you talk about a guy who, okay, should you have gone or stayed?
Yeah,
He
that's a
was
good
a
one.
guy that absolutely should have gone after that
Yep.
99 season. I don't think his stock ever would have been higher. And he didn't really have the NBA career that many thought he would. But he was a guy that I think was meant more for this era where he is 6'9", but he could step out. He could shoot the ball a little bit, 34% from beyond the arc for his career. He was a 78% free throw shooter. He was a good rebounder. He was he led the ACC in defensive win shares in 2000. He was a really good all-around player. So I think where I will go here, I'm going to just add a little bit more size, a little bit more length, a little bit more defensive prowess of this team. Maybe I'm spending too much time talking to coaches. I feel like I'm just defense, defense, defense. But I'm going to go Terrence Morris here to
It's a
finish
good call.
things off.
Yeah, the one I was looking at for your team was maybe a Jordan Williams, just another beefy guy that I think probably is another went too early guy for sure. Like he had a chance to be like a special player at Maryland, I think, and maybe Gary being toward the end of his run, sort of sped up his departure there a little bit. But yeah, Terrence Morris is a great call, and I wouldn't have thought of him. It just didn't pop to my mind as one of those stayed too long guys. But that's an absolutely great call because I think he was on like well on draft boards before that and chose to come back to his own detriment there.
Yeah, Jordan Williams with him, that's another guy who we talk about good player on a bad team. Of
Hmm.
course, he was great on that 2011 team as a freshman. He was just a rebounding machine, a great compliment playing along, a great fit as a freshman with Gravis Vasquez, with Eric Hayes, with a Landon Milborn. Just a really, really nice fit. And then that next season, they were not good, but he was good. He was very good. The reason I think I didn't select him was when I think about Jordan Williams, it's really more an offensive guy, good
Yeah, that's
rebounder,
true.
but
Yep.
it's really more the offensive side of things. I
Hmm.
never thought of him as a great defender.
No, agreed. And I think he's one of those guys that maybe could have been if he stuck around long enough. I don't know if the conditioning was maybe where he would want it to be. They weren't super deep in the front court there either. So it seemed like they were just like, hey, save all of your fouls and your energy for the offensive end and we'll figure out the rest. Okay, so that leaves me with one Mark Turgeon pick left. So a couple names here. I could go Anthony Cowan or Fats Russell as the guards potentially. Um, on the wing, Des Wells, Rashid Suleiman, Eric Ayala, Aaron Wiggins, Daryl Morcell's an option here, I think, too. The front court got Alex Len, Diamond Stone, DeMonte Dodd, Robert Carter. There's some pieces I think I could maybe fill this team out with. I think I got enough bigs. I think enough guards. So I'm going to go with one more wing here. Oh man, this becomes a really white team if I do this, but I got to go Jake Layman. I think I'm just sleeping on Jake. Another big guy, could be a little bit malleable with where we play him positionally, provide some spacing, and like a sneaky good athlete. I say sneaky again. The white guy thing, maybe the stereotype hurts a little bit there, but I actually sat behind Jake Layman on his official visit with he and his family at a game, and I was like, holy shit, this guy is tall. Like, he's a wing. Like, I remember being so excited with him. And honestly, like, maybe didn't fully get even to where I thought he would be as a Terp, but still a really solid player here. And feel pretty good about the value of my last pick. I guess, Steve, if you were me, where would you have gone with the last of the Turgeon era guys here?
Can you run through your whole team one more time for me, please?
Yeah, sure. So guards, I've got Gravis Vasquez, Melo Trimble, and Jacoby Gillespie. Front court players, I got Derek Queen, Julian Reese, and Lonnie Baxter. And then wings, I've got Kevin Herter, Nick Cantor Medley, and now Jake Layman.
Yeah, so the one thing I was thinking of here, and I had a really hard time separating these three guys. I had them all kind of lumped together. It's Aaron Wiggins,
Mhm.
Jake Layman, and then Des Wells. I
Yeah.
think I would have Des Wells probably last among those three. He just does not have the same shooting prowess
Yep.
as those other two. A little bit more of a player for a bygone era, but I was having a hard time, but he does bring some things that the others don't as well. Just the ability to get to the rim, good defender. So when I think about those three guys, I had a really hard time separating them, and I was kind of happy I didn't have to pick among them. Why did you go Layman over Wiggins?
Uh, I mean, obviously Wiggins is having, well, I don't know. Jake had a decent NBA career before probably fizzled out a little earlier than he would have liked. He's a little bit bigger, I think, which I thought would give me a little bit more positional size. And in my mind, he was the better 3-point shooter. I don't know if that's actually true. I was just going to pull up the numbers here and see what the 3-point shooting was during their career. So Layman's last year at Maryland, he was a 39.6 3-point shooter. And let's see what Aaron Wiggins was. Probably a little less than that would be my guess. But I think
He
the
was
other
like
thing,
36% for his career. Maybe I don't know why that number's in my head.
no, that's exactly what it was for his career. And actually, uh, Aaron's last year, he was 35.5%. So he was kind of all over the map. Good volume all 3 years, 41% as a freshman on 4.5 attempts, 32% as a sophomore on 5.5 attempts. And as a junior, he was 35.5% on about 5 attempts. So a little more up and down. I think Layman also was like a little more assertive to me at times, whereas like Wiggins seemed okay, like being more of a complimentary piece. And it always felt like he had the tools to do a little bit more than he actually did. So yeah, I felt like Layman just gave me like a little extra to work with, although Wiggins was the scored more points per game in their last year as a Terp, but I think Layman probably had more offensive options to work around.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Looking at these two teams, do you see a mismatch anywhere? Is there anywhere where you're like, oh, I don't know how my team's going to stop that guy, or your team's going to stop this guy?
Yeah, I think you guys have a little more length in the front court here with Bruno and Sticks, which is nice. We're a little beefier, so it depends on how the refs are calling that, maybe. But I think those would be fun matchups to watch there. I think you guys are probably a little more dynamic and a little more explosive when you look at some of the guys you've got, like Jameer Young coming off the bench gives you that little extra burst. Somebody like Bruno Fernando's getting up and down the court a little bit more. My guys, maybe we're subbing in and out a little bit more with my front court guys here just to not run them out. But yeah, I think these would be really fun teams to just see how they play out. Like I said, I really like that Rodney Rice pick, and maybe that's recency bias to some extent here, but something about him on one wing and Juan Dixon shooting threes on the other wing and Steve Blake kicking it out to them in transition would be pretty fun to watch. So Steve, run through the team one more time here for folks listening.
Absolutely. So I have Steve Blake, Juan Dixon, Rodney Rice, Justin Jackson, Jalen Smith. Then coming off the bench, I have Jameer Young, Bruno Fernando, Selton Miguel, and Terrence Morris. And in reality, I would probably start Bruno Fernando and Jalen Smith together, kind of recreate that 2019 team, and have Justin Jackson coming off the bench there.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent of this year's team, like the 3 guards and the 2 bigs together. And we saw how that recipe worked out today's college basketball. So I think that's a pretty good blueprint to follow. Let's run down I'm going to do 2 things. One, let's just talk through a couple other guys that if you had like a free space from any coach, who you would have liked to add to your group. And then let's talk about a couple guys each maybe that weren't on this list or didn't meet the qualifications that would have been at the top of your list. So why don't you start with one more? Like if you'd had a reserve spot for a free space, what would you go with?
Yeah, certainly. So I talked about him a little bit already, but Drew Nicholas is a guy I always loved. He just an unbelievable senior year from him. I love his 3-point shooting prowess and what he developed into key piece, reserve piece on the national championship team, and then really became a star his senior year. If there's one more guy I can throw out too from the Gary Williams era, it would be DJ Strawberry. I'm going to keep on that defense, run and gun, get up and down the court. Super athletic guy, really good defender, 4-year guy. Always a big fan of DJ Strawberry. Not the best outside shooter, but was able to get to the rim, pretty physical for a guard, and I think he would be a good fit in a reserve capacity on this team.
Yeah, that's a really good call. His era guy, Mike Jones, would have been fun just because it would have been more quotable stuff we got to yell out there. Who else did I have on this list? I think Chris McRae is sneaky, like a really modern player of like a wing that could shoot. He wasn't like this like absolute dead ringer 3-point shooter, but I think in modern basketball, he probably would have had that kind of range and touch. Obviously, his career at Maryland ended a little bit weird here. Uh, so all right, so maybe let's do this, Steve. Let's say let's just add one more guy to our team from anybody. So would Drew Nicholas have been your free space guy?
You know what? I actually don't think so.
Okay.
I think I would actually have gone with a guy I didn't mention. I think I would have gone another big
Okay.
because just looking at my bigs right now, I would like somebody that's just a little bit beefier.
Okay.
Now, who's out there? There's not a ton of beef out there. There's some athleticism. Chris Wilcox is out there.
Diamond Stone.
Diamond Stone is out there. Jordan Williams, Alex Len is out
There you go.
there. So I would probably go. I'd probably go Alex Len there. Just he's the biggest of those guys. The only true I think 7-footer on that list.
For me, I would want somebody that could again be fairly positionally versatile, but I just need like a little more bounciness, I think, and somebody that covered a little bit more court. So I think I would have gone James Gist just to have somebody that, you could put him on a wing if he needed to be, but also my front court wasn't like crazy athletic. I don't think like in terms of like run jump athleticism. Obviously, you could argue Derek Queen's hand-eye coordination is elite athleticism, but just sort of a different flavor. So I think Gist probably would have been my guy here just to mix things up a little bit. Also think you always need just like one crazy MFer on every good team. So I actually really probably would have considered like somebody like John Gilchrist just to liven things up here a little bit.
Yeah, you need one guy like that, and you need another guy to calm everything down.
Yeah,
You
right.
gotta have
Exactly.
you gotta have the balance.
Yeah, I feel like that's Kevin Herter. He's just like this quiet. The Red Mamba could have been quiet and just kept everybody in line here a little bit. All right, so Steve, who were the guys that didn't meet our criteria here that you think definitely would warrant consideration?
Yeah, I think two immediately jump to mind. So Steve Francis is somebody you and I both talked about
Yep.
offline a little bit. I mean, for my money, and look, I never saw Len Bias play, not old enough for that, but Steve Francis is the most electrifying, exciting Maryland basketball player I've ever seen in my entire life. Maybe it was my age, maybe it was the stage of life I was at, but I don't think so. I think he truly was just the most electrifying guy I've ever seen play Maryland basketball. And you combine, his athleticism and his ability with that style, that run and gun, up and down, pressing style that Gary played for all those years, and it was just magic. So I also can't imagine in today's day and age of college basketball where teams are so good at hunting mismatches,
Oh yeah,
getting Steve
he'd have
Francis
feasted.
on like
Yeah.
a not very mobile big and watching what he would do. So Steve Francis was the first guy that came to mind for me. Now another guy that came to mind is a guy that I unfortunately didn't see play, but I've heard all the stories of. I've seen the highlights. I've read about it. It's the Wizard, Walt Williams. I mean, talk about a guy who was born in the wrong era. He's a guy at 6'8" or so who had a really nice outside game. He just wasn't, I don't think, built for the physical grind of playing in the front court in the NBA during the early 90s. I mean, it was a completely different game. But man, when I was going through some of the Maryland record book stuff this season, as Derek Queen was setting all sorts of freshman records and doing things that we hadn't seen in forever, it's just astounding to look at how often Walt Williams' name shows up in there. And you look at his senior season, he was an All-American and he averaged nearly 27 points per game. He was forced to do it all, but he could do it all. And I think his game is tailor made for this era of college basketball.
Yeah, I think he's the guy that you could like. Steve Francis to me is the guy you pick and then you build a whole team around, just like enabling him to do what he does, let him hunt free throws, get to the rim, space things out for him. Walt is the guy I think you could have put on any of the teams, no matter how you picked him, and he just fits because he did enough of everything to make work at that point. So those are two no-brainers. Joe Smith's got to get some mention here. To me, it probably would have been the third of those kind of guys to go though, because at least somebody like a Derek Queen replicates, what I think you would have gotten from somebody like a Joe Smith, whereas like no one else was really doing for you, what a Steve Francis or even what Walt Williams would do for you, I think.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that outside of those three, but no, I think those were the main three right there. If we couldn't include Terrence Morris, I was going to include him for sure.
Yeah, that's no. I'm glad you got him in there too because he really is like I don't want to say like one of those forgotten guys because like we're obviously talking about him, but definitely dude that doesn't get mentioned with for how
Oh,
good of a
I
player he
think I'm going
was.
to get a lot of hate for that pick from people out there. To be
Think so?
honest, I think that I'll get a lot of hate for that pick, and I think I'll get a lot of hate for the Justin Jackson pick as well. Two guys that I think had flashes, had some really good moments at
Yeah.
Maryland, but didn't necessarily have the right trajectory in their career, so they get a little bit forgotten or a little bit dismissed.
I had them both on my list, so I'm with you. I think they made a lot of sense. Just a few other random names. I just kind of had forgotten about Terrell Stoglin completely. Stoglin, just I don't know. I just blanked that team out of my memory bank here. At some point, we didn't mention Daryl Marcel at all here, but as another dude that I think would fit on any team of just like a versatile wing guard defender that became a decent enough shooter, kind of a self-made guy. So I always like those kind of dudes that worked their way up. So I think mentioning someone like him's worth it too.
Daryl Morcell was what everybody hoped Deshaun Harris Smith was going to be, right? And just didn't work out that way.
It's kind of funny. Like I lump those two and a little bit of Sean Mosley all as these guys that were like that same kind of general build, not crazy athletes, but solid enough, fairly strong. The shooting just didn't come around all the way here. And looking at Sean Mosley and DHS, it was like both like electric scorers in high school, and then that somehow just did not translate to college at all. But obviously, you know, found a way for Sean there to make it work a little bit more than DHS. Although we wish him well at Georgetown. So, Steve, the single most important question of the podcast here: where can people find you and more of the great work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I host the Route One Rundown. It's part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. There's so much great stuff going on there. A lot of it by Matt himself. Just thrilled to be a part of it. So you can go check out the Department of Hoops YouTube page. You can find my podcast, the Route One Rundown, there, talking Terps basketball and Terps basketball only all year round. I'm really excited about something that I'm going to do coming up here, Matt. I think one of the things when you cover a team that you forget about is that they are, in fact, not playing nameless, faceless mannequins. They are other teams, and they have changes, especially in this era of college basketball. It's not like outside of Purdue, where you kind of know a bunch of guys coming back. There's so much change going on in college basketball and throughout the Big Ten right now. So over the course of the summer, really going to spend a lot of time, of course, talking Terps, but also diving into some of those other teams around the Big Ten, some of the big changes that we're going to see, and kind of get familiar with who they have coming back, who they have coming in, and how those teams have changed. Because in this transfer portal era, I mean, there's just so much change year over year. Look no further than Maryland this season, but Indiana completely overhauled their roster. Iowa, after a coaching change, completely overhauled their roster. So I'm really excited to be doing a lot of that this summer. You can also find me across all social media platforms at Gorg on Sports, talking Terps, talking college basketball, college football, local sports, kind of talking it all to some extent, doing something called the 295 Sports Minute.
I was just going to plug that if you didn't, so I'm glad.
Thank you. So I've been doing this recently. It's 1 minute where I'm talking about one big sports story that's going on in Baltimore, in DC, or somewhere in between. So that's been really fun. So you can follow me TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. I'm on all of it, all at the same handle, at Gorgon Sports. And then, of course, you can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast and at the Department of Hoops YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think that's such a good idea, too, especially in the summer. Everybody's busy. You can't keep up with every sport at all times. So it's been helpful for me I'm not a big Caps guy, but it helps me to at least when I show up in the office, the people that work there, I at least kind of know what's going on. So you've been saving me there a little bit. And I think that's a great idea to do these team specific breakdowns. Like as a basketball sicko, I'm still like, wait. Donovan Dent is on UCLA now. Like it's just hard to keep track of where all these people are. So I think that's a real resource for everybody to go check out.
Yeah, appreciate it, Matt. I can't thank you enough for having me on the show. This was an absolute blast.
Yeah, well, expect to be asked back a bunch because I got a couple other ideas for us here over the course of the summer here. So thank you for making the time to do it. For everybody watching this, please hit that like button for us on YouTube. It really does help make the show more discoverable. If you like ideas like this, let us know. We're trying different things here. While there's not a ton to talk about, Portal's a little quiet at the moment. There's some recruiting stuff. We'll probably have Colby Jacobino from IMS here on at some point to talk about some of that recruiting. But just let us know, like I said, if there's any things you want to hear about. And let us know in the comments if there is a particular guy we definitely whiffed on or should have included. Always interesting to hear who you would have liked. And let us know who you think. Whose team would you have gone with ultimately, in a one death or one game sudden death only NCAA tournament matchup. All right, Steve, thanks again, man. Appreciate you. Let's talk soon. And for everybody listening, rate, review, subscribe. We appreciate all that stuff. And remember to fear the podcast.